All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to night 23 of our 24 nights of live streams. And we're always offering a constructive alternative to politics as usual with the American Union. And we start these sessions off with the preamble to the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now tonight we're going to focus on, we're going to wrap up the legislative package tonight, and then tomorrow we'll spend the whole evening recapping and answering any questions anyone has. But as always tonight, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as we go through the sections on the environment this evening, plus a little technical boilerplate stuff. Yeah, so the preamble, that's our mission statement for the United States. Those are our five duties for ourselves and for our nation. And it's that last one that we're going to conclude talking about, Title V, the duty to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And our posterity is our kids. I don't know how many of you have kids, but a very large percentage of them are concerned about climate change, about the environment, about what sort of planet are they going to inherit. And as we've just seen from, as a couple big hurricanes have just reminded us, there is reason to be concerned. And so what do we do about that? Unfortunately, to a certain extent, the environment can be a wedge issue. So we've addressed a number of the other wedge issues in here, racism through mass incarceration and immigration systems, guns, abortions, and now the environment. And so because there are common sense solutions. There are ways to address the problem. And mostly what this is addressing the external costs. When big fossil fuel companies pollute, when they spew greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and over decades and decades change our climate, those costs get borne by other people for the most part, right? Everyone who's had there not been climate change and Hurricane Milton had still formed in the Gulf, that would almost certainly have been smaller, would have been less destructive. And so the people who are impacted as a result of more severe weather events, whether those events are heat, whether they're droughts, whether they're cold weather, blizzards, things like that, hurricanes, any of these things, the people who are affected and would not have been otherwise, these are the people who are bearing the costs of this pollution. And so we can address that by taking those external costs and shifting them towards the beginning of the process, towards the beginning of the pollution cycle, and making those costs part of doing business, part of the economy, because the economy is all of us. And so, as Dr. King famously said, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. I think I messed that up. But yeah, we can all look out for each other. And the best way to look out for each other is with a union of voters. Voters who refuse to play partisan politics and instead focus on setting policy because Congress is failing to act. And once again, with the environment, this has become a polarizing issue where the Republican Party has oftentimes not only just opposed environmental regulations, but actually reversed or blocked efforts. My understanding is Florida, under Governor DeSantis, has deleted all references to climate change from their law books, and they're purposely ignoring science. Is there any debate about what's going on? Well, you can debate anything. So you can have a debate, but it doesn't mean that debate represents, I'm going to say, reality, right? Facts are facts. Just because someone is willing to argue about stuff, and you probably know people who are willing to argue about things that aren't really up for discussion. But the science is pretty settled, and America's youth are frustrated that we're not doing anything about it, that Congress is failing to set policy. So we're going to help Congress set policy by negotiating for one set of legislative demands nationwide, all 470 congressional districts, the Trump-Biden peace plan, 101 policies to move America forward. Instead of just shifting this political pendulum left and right, we can go forward into the 21st century. And so, all right. Well, let's go ahead and open up the legislative package and start. We've got looking at six sections tonight. The first three deal with pollution fees, and the last three, Title VI, is just the legislative boilerplate that wraps up the legislative package. So let me share my screen, and we'll start looking at Title V, Subtitle C, pollution fees. Okay, where'd the screen share go? Okay, pollution fees. All right, Section 551, findings and purpose. The Congress finds the following. Americans have a constitutional duty to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. America's children are our posterity, and they are on track to inherit many environmental problems unless something is changed. 2, responsible adults clean up their messes, or try and avoid making them in the first place. By placing a fee on the production of plastic and carbon, an economic incentive to pollute less will be created. These fees serve as clawbacks to the payments made under the American Union Jobs Program, reducing inflation in a way that supports a long-term goal of improving our children's inheritance. 3, America produces excessive amounts of per capita plastic waste, and only about 9% of all plastic ever manufactured has been recycled. A fee on the production of virgin plastic resin, starting at 20%, will spur greater demand for recycled plastic, which is exempt from the fee. At the same time, a flat 5-cent fee on plastic products will encourage more mindful consumption and less single-use plastic. 4, carbon fee is a widely recognized way to address the external costs of using fossil fuels. Most Western nations are implementing them, and U.S. exports to Europe will soon have to pay a carbon border tax if there is no corresponding carbon fee here. This carbon fee starts at $20 per metric ton. The purpose of this subtitle is to preserve the environment for ourselves and our posterity. And so carbon section 552, we can see, is broken down into two parts, chapter 1 and chapter 101 and chapter 102. And so let's talk about that for a second. So as the findings said, there are many nations that are instituting carbon pricing, again, as a way to make the market reflect the actual cost of the harm that is being done to our our shared environment, right? This is like a tragedy of the commons, where individuals have no disincentive to pollute the heck out of the environment if other people are going to end up bearing the costs. So, according to Citizens Climate Lobby, whose model legislation is largely reflected in Section 552, they write on their website that as of May 2021, there are 64 carbon pricing policies in operation and 3 scheduled for implementation. And the list of countries that already practice some method of national carbon pricing include Argentina, Canada, Chile, China, Colombia, Denmark, the European Union, 27 countries, Japan, Kazakhstan, Korea, Mexico, New Zealand, Norway, Singapore, South Africa, Sweden, the UK, and Ukraine. And other countries that are considered joining them include Brazil, Brunei, Indonesia, Pakistan, Russia, Serbia, Thailand, Turkey, and Vietnam. They say of the world's developed economies, only Australia and the US do not have nationwide carbon pricing in place. Like numerous policies within the legislative package, the United States is an outlier. The rest of the world has figured it out, but our dysfunctional democracy is not letting us do the things that the rest of the world recognize are working. So we can fix that. We can flip the model around. Since Congress is failing to act, we the people can crowdsource the process and use our votes to inspire them to act before the election. So climate change. All right, it's got another fact about climate change and fossil fuels. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they find that 89% of global CO2, carbon dioxide emissions, came from fossil fuels and industries. That was in 2018. So the vast majority of emissions are coming from fossil fuels. Carbon dioxide comes from other places too, right? We breathe. But the vast majority of it is coming from fossil fuels. So that's what has changed, and that's what can be put back on track. 2 other things in here. Well, a couple other things. All right. So one, as we've talked about in different aspects of this legislation, is addressing supply and demand. And so rather than try and restrict the supply and say, all right, we're going to ration and everybody only gets 10 gallons of gas per week, and that way we're going to reduce the amount of fuel that's burned in the United States. You could try and restrict the supply. There are many reasons why that is a bad idea, and why it would not generally be functional. So the smarter way is carbon pricing, addressing the demand side. If we make things more expensive, people will buy less of them. People will find alternatives. People will find ways to be more fuel efficient. Just in the last decade, right, we've seen a huge increase in the number of electric vehicles. Electric vehicles still have a carbon footprint, but they don't have internal combustion engines. They don't have to burn gasoline in order to get from point A to point B. So again, rather than trying to restrict the supply, because we've seen lots of areas where that just does not work well, going after the demand through taxes. And so like the value-added tax, a tax on carbon is a progressive tax when it is coupled with unconditional basic income. This is the way that the Citizens Climate Lobby, the way that their model legislation is structured, where they would tax carbon, all that money would be put into a pot and then divvied out to an equal share for every citizen. And so we're doing this as on a larger scale, but we're doing this on a larger scale. But so people's tax burden will go up under the Trump-Biden peace plan. you can expect a one-time bump in prices of 12%, just like we saw in that chart of when Japan raised their value-added tax. And you can expect the price of gas to go up as well. And that's what your unconditional basic income, the American Union Jobs Program, is a pre-fund on your tax burden. So you're covered for your first $16,800 a year in increased taxes, and then after that you become a net payer. As we've talked about 80% of Americans would come out ahead under the system, and it is a progressive combination of taxes. How much would the price of gas go up? Well, we've seen huge fluctuations in the last few years. Estimates are that for every 10 cents of a carbon fee, you can see the price of gas go up by 11 cents per gallon. So for every $10 per metric ton of carbon, 11 cents per gallon. So the legislative package starts with a $20, we'll see, $20 per metric ton fee on carbon. And that'll add 22 cents when it goes into effect. And then you can expect it to go up by 11 cents or so, it's adjusted for inflation, 11 cents or so every year after that. And so people will figure this cost into their calculations of buying vehicles. People look for more fuel efficient vehicles. There will increase the demand for fuel efficient vehicles, and the market will supply them. The market will produce less gas guzzlers and more fuel efficient ones. So this is, again, we talked about the 5 things that taxes do as a way of influencing the economy, and one of them is steering policy. And so this is a good example of how to do that. All right. What else? Oh, what are the other benefits besides addressing climate change? What are the other benefits of not burning so much gasoline, cleaning up the air? The carbon fee and dividend is projected to prevent over 230,000 premature deaths over 20 years because of improved air quality. We're not stewarding the environment where we're just like, you know what, let a 250,000 people can die from the air quality and that'll be fine. We can do better. Our children deserve better. So, all right, let's get into this first chapter, which is the actual carbon fee, the carbon tax. What's the difference, you might ask, between a fee and a tax? And it's they're largely synonymous, but a tax is generally thought of as a way of raising revenue, whereas a fee is something that you get for a privilege or for a service. And so a carbon fee is something that you pay in order to get the privilege of harming the environment by emitting fossil greenhouse gases into the environment. That's what the fee is for. So if you call it a carbon tax, I promise I'm not offended. All right, so chapter 101, we've got a bunch of different sections here. And let's take a look through here. Definitions, as usual, are pretty standard. This is worth pointing out, though. Carbon dioxide equivalent, or CO2. So greenhouse gases also means does not just mean carbon. So again, we call it a carbon tax or carbon fee, but it includes other greenhouse gases that have the equivalent global warming potential as 1 metric ton. So other greenhouse gases would be subject to this. All right, carbon intensive products, and some of these are And so some of the biggest ones are iron, steel, steel mill products, aluminum, cement, glass, pulp, paper, chemicals, and industrial ceramics. All right. Covered entity. So who does this apply to? In case of crude oil, it's at the refinery and any importer. So whoever refines it or imports the finished product into the United States is responsible for the carbon fee. In the case of coal, it's the coal miner or the importer. In the case of natural gas, it's whoever actually puts the natural gas into the pipeline, or any importer of natural gas. And it also includes any other entities that the secretary may determine. So we got cover other basic definitions, nothing real crazy, especially again here, greenhouse gas means carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and other gases defined by rule. And this deals with revenue. This is the Secretary of the Treasury, who would be into their department. All right, Section 9902, carbon fee. There is imposed a carbon fee on the covered entities emitting use. The amounts is the greenhouse gas content of the covered fuel, again, not just carbon, multiplied by the carbon fee rate. In the case of calendar year 2025, $20, and calendar years thereafter, $10. An additional $10. All right. And then inflation adjustment. So each of those amounts shall be increased by the cost of living every year. All right, emissions reduction schedule. These are the target emission reductions for 2027. Got a reference year of 2010. And trying to cut emissions 5% those first 8 years, and then 3% years after that. 9904 is the decommissioning. So, all right, this is not, we talked about the E-Verify system yesterday, and the quote, there's nothing so permanent as a temporary government program. This has a very clear sunset. This will very clearly go away when we get greenhouse gases down to 10% of what they were in 2010. So once we've succeeded in reducing things 90%, then the system can go away. All right, other exceptions are carbon capture and sequestration. So if you're not actually emitting, then you're not contributing and to climate change. And so this is the formula for making payments back to carbon capture and sequestration facilities. There is this sentence here is different than the model legislation. Under these regulations, if you are producing plastics, for example, it was proposed that would be permitted as a way of carbon capture, right? That you're not burning the fossil fuels, you're turning them into plastics. That exemption goes away. We're not opening a loophole to encourage more plastic production. A couple of the other changes here are, there was also an exemption for farmers and for the military. Those exemptions have also been removed. And then 9906, also includes just authority to issue regulations, making a point to minimize administrative burdens. Text is here somewhere. Yeah, finding the places where to in the cycle of to collect a carbon fee that it minimizes the administrative burden, and sets up formulas for monthly payments, and ensures that there's no double taxation. Make sure to have rules that ensure no covered fuel has the carbon fee or border fee imposed more than once. So that's that basic framework. Yeah, so the exemption for the U.S. military that was in this most of this language like I said, came from model legislation, HR 2307, the the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act of 2021, HR 2307. But the exemption for the U.S. military, as I think we've talked about, the military industrial complex is the largest single producer of greenhouse gases on the planet. It kicks out more emissions than industrialized nations like Sweden and Denmark. And so giving an exemption to the largest consumer of fossil fuels on the planet seems counterproductive. So you could recognize the spirit of supporting the military, but as a way to actually address environmental issues, no, you can't give them an exemption. So that was removed as well. And then the part for farmers. Again, the reason this is a carbon fee is because by paying this fee, you get the privilege of polluting the environment. That's what you're getting for this fee. And so if farmers are polluting, as well as everyone who drives to work and does all these other things, cooks with natural gas and all these things that people do that pollute, you pay the fee for the privilege of polluting our shared environment that our children are going to inherit, our posterity. And again, that will show up, that will pass through to consumers in prices that reflect the actual harm that is being caused by the production of those products. And again, your UBI is a pre-fund on the increased tax burden. So everybody's included, no exemptions, and that's how that works out. Yeah, sometimes so it's been pointed out, remember, and there's a sunset clause in there, but remember that this is not a funding mechanism for UBI. This is an offset for UBI, right? The amount of revenue that this carbon fee brings in, even though the fee itself is going to go up, the revenue itself is going to go down. That's on purpose. That's because we are driving down demand for fossil fuels, and people will look to pollute less. So this will raise less and less revenue over time. All right, that's chapter 101. Question in the chat. All right, chapter 102. Chapter 102 is the carbon border fee adjustment. And as we talked about, pretty much every country has a carbon fee. And starting January 1, 2026, the European Union will enforce a carbon border adjustment. So if you are importing into Europe from a country that does not tax carbon, then that would be unfair competition, right? If you're doing all your polluting on one side of a line and then trying to compete in the marketplace with people who are paying a fee on the other side of the line, that would be unfair competition. So this carbon border adjustment will address that. And and so January 1, 2026. So the United States is going to be putting money into the European system because we're not taxing it here at home. We can fix this problem by passing this legislation. We can address these problems right here, right now, and keep that tax revenue here in the United States and use it to offset UBI. This is once again, Congress is failing to set policy. Congress should be addressing this, and they're not. So, yeah. So that's what's going to happen. That's what exporters are going to face in 2026. This is not a surprise. This is something that has been known for years, that has been on the book, been scheduled for implementation. I've been talking about this for years, and Congress is still failing to act. One estimate says that once it's fully implemented in Europe, it's expected to increase the marginal cost of commodities by an average of 10%. That's things like iron, steel, cement, aluminum, fertilizers, electricity, and hydrogen products. Yeah. So, all right, we're going to fix that. The United States will implement a carbon border fee adjustment. And let's take a look at the specific language that does that. All right, we've got four sections in Chapter 102. Carbon border fee adjustment. Again, so imports to the United States, there shall be a fee equal to the total carbon fee that would have been imposed if it had been produced domestically. And the Secretary can make administrative modifications. If you are exporting something, you can get a credit or refund without interest to the exporter of something that you've already paid the carbon fee on. If you're not going to a place that already has, if it's not to it's going someplace beside that doesn't have their own carbon border fee adjustment. And refund up to 75% of the total carbon fees. So that's as to not make the United States intentionally less competitive, but to still address the structural issues with taxing pollution. How to administer the Section 9912 is about the administration. And encouraging the Secretary of the Treasury to collaborate with officers from other jurisdictions that are affected by it and schedule it. Make sure that implementation goes into effect no later than October 30th, 2026. Given the fact Europe is doing it on January 1st of that year, I mean, the purpose of this was to say give a two-year window. But anyways, that's what the language says. All right. Shipment to territories from the United States, or from the United States to territories. So this doesn't count with the territories the same way that, if you're shipping something from Michigan to Wisconsin, you wouldn't be subject to the carbon border adjustment. So it doesn't count if you're shipping stuff to Guam, Virgin Islands, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, and the North Mariana Islands. The one exception is the sorry, that's imports. If you're importing into those places, then you're not subject to the fee. However, if you're shipping from the United States into American Samoa, American Samoans, as you may or may not know, are not American citizens. They're American nationals. They are not citizens, and they will not be eligible for the American Union Jobs Program because they're not citizens. And so accordingly, if they're not getting pre-funded for this increased tax burden, then the products that the United States ships there would get a refund of the carbon fee. 913. I said a minute ago about keeping this money here in the United States, and I guess that's not actually correct. This is not a tariff. This is money that is a fee for the privilege of polluting, and it would go to the Green Climate Fund. Because if it was a tariff, then it would be subject to World Trade Organization consequences. So it's the loophole of how to not be a tariff. And then international negotiations and sunset in 19914. The author of if there's any changes to the structure worldwide of how these things work, the Secretary of State is authorized to alter to bring us into conformance, and the Congress encourages the Secretary of State to negotiate with other countries along these lines. The Secretary may suspend the carbon border fee in whole or in part. Again, once we've hit that 90% target, the tax goes away. And if we have, so the Secretary can partially suspend provisions, and by treaty or other international agreement that meets the criteria of this and includes provision for the suspension of the carbon border fee adjustment. So again, as part of international agreements, we all work together, right? So we're not, as you remember from the previous chapter, so we're avoiding double taxation. The amendments shall take place on passage, except the carbon fee doesn't apply for another year till the end of the 2025 fiscal year. In case of ambiguity, they should be interpreted to allow for the most effective abatement of greenhouse gas emissions. And last but not least, no preemption of state law. Nothing in any of this legislation shall preempt or supersede or be interpreted to supersede any state laws or regulations. So, in short, states can be stricter. This is a floor, not a ceiling. So, okay. All right. Well, that covers the carbon fee and the border adjustment. Yeah. All right. Now we're going to move on to section 553, the plastic fee. Plastic has, I think I got a chart here. Plastic production worldwide has, let's do a couple charts here real quick. This is the growth of plastic production from 1950, started at zero, up to, it says 450 million. This is metric tons, not US tons. But there's an awful lot of plastic. And then, so what happens to the plastic? Well, of the plastic waste generated, 23% gets gets landfilled, recycled, or incinerated. I'm going to come back to that one in a second. So about 3/4 of it gets, quote unquote, captured. But the other quarter, 23%, gets mismanaged. And then what happens then? Gets leaked into the environment, leaked to rivers and coast, and some of it ends up in the ocean. You've probably heard about things like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, where there's just all this loose plastic is floating on the surface of the ocean. That's the visible stuff that you can see, but there's also a lot that sinks that ends up in the environment. And the oceans is not just, the oceans don't belong to the United States. This is an international problem. It is a global problem. And so the United Nations in March of 2022, they adopted a resolution to end plastic pollution with an international legally binding treaty. And they were especially concerned about marine plastic. So they are working on that treaty. They've met 4 times. They've made progress on language that would limit production. Their 5th and final session is coming up in South Korea at the end of November, and they should have language for a treaty. Now, if the United States doesn't actually join this treaty, it doesn't necessarily help things here. And the United States, again, produces a lot more. We produce 5 times the plastic waste per capita compared to people in Europe. And as far as recycling, it's 9%. 9% of all the plastic ever produced has been recycled. The other 91% is not. And these companies, they know that recycling is not an answer to the problem of plastic pollution. Because for many things, if you're making a drink bottle and things like that, right? I don't know. There are disadvantages to making things out of recycled plastic. It is not designed to be infinitely recyclable, and they know. They know that plastic is not being recycled. They know that's not the solution. The solution to plastic pollution is to cut production. And how do we cut production? Well, again, this new international treaty is making progress on limiting production. Well, the trick, again, is enforcement mechanisms. What do? How do you enforce that people don't produce plastic? And so rather than trying to limit the supply, this section 553 will go after the demand. Increase the cost of plastic and you will reduce the demand. That's the way it works. And so we're also going to increase recycling, because this is a plastic fee, 20% fee on sales of virgin plastic resin. So on new plastic. Recycled plastic is exempt. So that creates a financial incentive where plastic recycling is not financially viable for many reasons. We're going to make the production of new plastic less financially viable, which will make recycling more attractive. So that's the gist of the first half. The second half of this, there's the plastic. The second half is the discouraging single-use plastics with a flat 5-cent fee on individual plastic products. So this is intended to address single-use plastics, to discourage their use, to make sure that the cost of them better reflects the cost of the harm being done to the environment. Because the thing is, plastics don't biodegrade for the most part. There's some obscure ones that can not break down. But for the most part, plastic, when it's left out in the sun, right, it just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, into microplastics. And then And then those things get into everything. They get into our blood. We've got microplastics in our blood. Newborn babies, embryos, already have microplastics in their blood. That is how much the United States and these industries have polluted the planet. What kind of inheritance is that to leave to your children? Welcome to life. Here, you have microplastics in your blood. We can do better. We can do better by driving down the demand for plastics so that they're not a cheap alternative, that their costs better reflect the true harm that they cause. And again, this is popular. There was a poll in 2021 by Siena showing 81% of American voters support national policies to reduce single-use plastics. And so a nickel is a way of reducing single-use plastics. You can still use them. They're not banned, but they won't be as popular. People will look for other ways to avoid using plastics, single-use plastics. Because you think about, your computer, your car, your television set, any sort of durable good that you have, a nickel per plastic product is nothing. It is insignificant. But for something that you're going to use once and then throw away, a nickel might be significant. So we'll encourage more mindful consumption. And we've talked about that's one of the duties of nonviolence. All right, let's go ahead and dig into this text and keep moving right along. Chapter 553, the plastic fee. Sorry, section 553. All right, chapter 1 adds a new chapter on plastic fees. Definitions, this is the administrator of the EPA. Imports, manufacturers, means a business entity which produces plastic products from a petrochemical base, including but not limited to. I'm not going to read all those specific things. Business entity, you might recognize this definition. Business entity does not include an entity whose taxable receipts for the taxable year are less than 3 times the basic wage. So if you're exempt from the value added tax, you're also exempt from the plastic fee on plastic products. Multi-pack. So if you're buying a case of water, you're going to pay a nickel on each individual plastic product. Public sale, these items for public sale means the final purchase of a plastic product prior to use. It does not include the purchase of secondhand products. All right, plastic production fee is imposed by the value of the resin multiplied by the plastic production fee. In case of in the year 2025, that would be 20%, and then it would increase 3% each year after that. So an escalating fee on producing new plastic. How that's calculated: for imports, declared value of the resin. In case of sale, the sale price of the resin. In case of production, no double taxation. Right. So here's the thing where if you're a producer of the virgin plastic resin and also the consumer of it, then you can apply a production fee that would be, how much that would have cost as a fair market value. And then the plastic consumption fee, 5 cents. This does not go up over time. Is 5 cents the right number? Should it be adjusted in time? Perhaps, but 5 cents is our starting point. There's exceptions for products sold in bulk quantities of minimal functionality in single unit. Think of like styrofoam packing peanuts. The secretary by rule may establish a weight or measure of which the quantity shall be considered. They could be taxed by the pound or something like that. And then administrative authority, and effective at the end of the 2025 fiscal year. Once again, this is a floor, doesn't preempt or supersede any state law or regulation. Okay, moving on. Done with Title V. We're going to move to Title VI, the miscellaneous provisions. Section 601, this is just a standard severability clause. So if any aspect of the Trump-Biden peace plan is successfully challenged in court, you don't have to throw the whole thing out. Yeah, that's it. Pretty standard stuff. 1602 is a savings clause. Yeah, so if you have existing legal remedies, then it can't be construed to limit them. Remember we talked about the Anti-Effective Death Penalty, Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act, I think a few days ago, and how the Supreme Court has ruled that passage of that act limited people's habeas corpus rights. So this has a savings clause to be very clear that we're not limiting any existing remedies in any of these sections. They're all still are there. And I can't even scroll down anymore because we're at the end of the chapter. All right, 603, unless otherwise noted, the act shall be effective on passage. You notice lots of places where there were actual effective dates. When there isn't, by default, it is effective on passage. Okay, we did it. We made it through all 101 policies, all 311 pages, all I don't know how many sections that's were. We made it through the whole Trump-Biden peace plan. Congratulations. Tomorrow, October 14th, we're going to be doing a one-day recap. We'll look at the polls, talk a little more about theory, about what might be up for the American Union going forward, and look at and take questions. So tomorrow, if people have questions, we'll keep this open more than an hour and make sure everybody has an opportunity to answer questions, have their questions answered. Again, this is a better model for democracy, where voters get a clear choice, have clear knowledge about what exactly is being proposed, not nebulous sound bites with very specific policy details, and they can decide to bargain for those or not. That being said, I have decided to suspend the American Union's 2024 campaign. It is the amount of people that have come forward and been willing to collectively bargain has not showed up in the polls, and it does not appear to be an effective, to be in a constructive alternative for 2024. So, that being said, the faster piece is still October 15th. The general strike that corresponds with it for that one day is also suspended. The general strike in the ballot box is suspended. And the whole point, though, is that these things are decentralized. Individuals can still observe them if they want. They can go through the process of voting together as a block through a random endorsement. However, the American Union will not be promoting and promoting that effort for the 2024 cycle. As you know, I began a fast on September 21st, International Day of Peace, to demonstrate my commitment to seeing this legislation move forward. Accordingly, with the suspension, I have started taking liquid calories again. I ended my fast just short of 21 days and 8 hours, which was the length of my fast in 2022. So I specifically did not want this to be a new record for me. If the campaign didn't succeed, I didn't want to have a feeling of accomplishment by setting a longer fasting record. So I specifically broke it after 21 days and just under 8 hours. That being said, I'm on liquid calories for the next couple days until the fast for peace on October 15th. And I will be fasting for 24 hours of water only. You're invited to join me. There is still a pledge form on the American Union's website. And if you fill out the form and pledge, you get a free digital download of Looking Backward from the Tricentennial, the novel showing how the American Union model can work in the future. All right. I think that's going to about do it. Oh, so my lowest weight was 177 pounds. And I expect to go back up to, probably 190 over the next week or two. Yeah. So it's a good experiment. The United States is worth saving. And we'll see what happens in November and what the options might be for 2026 and going forward. So, all right, with that, I'm going to end the live stream, and I hope to see you tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. for the final 24th day of our 24 live streams. Have a great rest of your week.